feel me, which is Chaf Tas of Nazir. Stay 5 minutes and then you'll go. Okay. Stay 5 minutes and then you go. No. So the Mishnah told us that a man can make his son a Nazir, but a woman cannot make her son a Nazir. So the Gemara says, Ish in Avo Ishalo on the bottom of Chesam Abayz. A man can make his son a Nazir, but not a woman. My time. What's the reason why only a man can make his son a Nazir and not a woman? So the Gemara explains. Rabbi Yochanan says this is halacha ben Nazir. This is halacha Moshe Misina by a Nazir. That it's just halacha Moshe Misina that only a man has the right to make his son a Nazir and not a woman. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanino says that it's not a halacha Moshe Misina. He says the name of Reish Lakish on top of Chavtes Samad Aleph is Kedei Lechancho b'mitzvos. That the only reason why the man can do it and not the mother. The only reason why the father can do it and not the mother is in order to be mechanech the son of mitzvahs, in order to teach the son how to do the mitzvahs. What's the mitzvah of a Nazir? The mitzvah of a Nazir is to teach him precious in life, to teach him limitations in life, to teach him not to go crazy with excess, to how to limit things. So if that's the case, the Gemara says, why isn't a mother also obligated to teach her son how to in this mitzvah of chinuch? So the Gemara explains, only a man is obligated to teach his son the chinuch, but not a mother. But it's difficult. Of course, the mother is obligated. So the commentaries explain the mother is obligated to teach the core things. That you have to keep the Torah, keep all the mitzvahs. But the father, his obligations are in the extras. Like a Nazir is about being an extra. How you push yourself beyond the letter of the law, that's the father's responsibility. So the Gemara says, okay, so again, the one answer is Rabbi Yochanan says that why can a father make the son a Nazir and not the mother? It's just halacha Moshe Sinai. It's just a straight law from Moses Sinai. Whereas Reish Lakish says that it's not that it's a straight law from Moses Sinai. It's that it's the mitzvah of chinuch, of educating the child, is on the father and not on the mother. So the Gemara says, and the Gemara is going to give through a few scenarios. Bishlam or Rabbi Yochanan makes sense. Contra Rabbi Yochanan, he says, "Halachi ben Nazir, amtu achi beno and bitolo." That's why you can make your son a Nazir and not your daughter, because it's just a straight out halacha Moshe Misinai. El Reish Lakish afilu bito. So according to Reish Lakish, why can the father not make his daughter a Nazir? Gemara says, "Kasavar beno chay b'chancho bito eino chay b'chancho." He says you're only obligated to train your son to make him a Nazir. You're only obligated to train your son in mitzvos, but not your daughter. But nowadays, probably even everybody sends their Jewish children to schools. Even the Satmar Hasidim, even all the Hasidim, they send their children to schools because the government says you have to send your children to school. So if you're going to say I'm not sending her to a Jewish school, then she's going to have to go to a different school. So everybody has to teach their sons and their daughters Torah today. So Bishlam or Rabbi Yochanan makes sense according to Rabbi Yochanan. Says Halachi ben Nazir, says Halacha Moshe Misina by Nazir. For this reason, Halachi ben Nazir siman nedarim lo. That's why it's a straight law that you can make your son a Nazir, but you can't take other nedarim from him. You can't take other vows for him. El Reish Lakish, but according to Reish Lakish, I feel nedarim namilo. According to Reish Lakish, he should also be. I feel nedarim nami. He should also be able to make your vows for your son. So the Gemara says, "Lomi bai kamra." No, it's a Lomi bai Mishnah. That Reish Lakish would read our Mishnah saying, "Lomi bai ben nedarim." Not only nedarim are you able to make for your son, delay slay nivel. There's not disgusting for him. El afil ben naziros, but even to make him a Nazir, the islay nivel, which is turning him into something disgusting. Nevertheless, you're still obligated to treat him in this way, and you can make him a Nazir. The Gemara says, Bishlam or Rabbi Yochanan, it makes sense. For Rabbi Yochanan, who says it's halacha Moshe Misinai, Damar Halachi ben Nazir, Hainu dikatani. For this reason, it states that Micho shemichu krovav. That's why it says that the relatives can object and they can stop it, because halacha Moshe Misinai, that even though the father makes him a Nazir, the relatives can object and stop it. El Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina Amar Reish Kol Kaminu and Karovim Damrina Leilo Tigmarei Mitzvos. How could the relatives, if Reish Lakish says it's just because it's a mitzvah of chinuch, how could the relatives butt in? Excuse my French, and just say we're stopping you from becoming a Nazir? So the Gemara says yes, because Reish Lakish is of the position Kasavar Kol Chinuch Tlo Chashiv Lo Nichale. The Reish Lakish is of the opinion that the relatives can say this is not chinuch. You're doing bad for your child. You're making him into a stigma. You're turning him into a Nazirite, and he's not. You're going to tell him he can't cut his hair. There was a case like this. that the Nazir in Jerusalem in the he died in I think 72 or something. I forget what year he died, but he made his son and his daughter Nazir, and the people got upset at him, and the son rejected his Nazirus of his father before he became bar mitzvah, and then his father was disappointed, but the son became the chief rabbi of Haifa. Okay, so the Gemara says Bishlam. It makes sense according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says Alachi ben Nazir Mishamachi Megaleach V'Avid Akafa. It makes sense according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says it's Halacha Moshe Sinai by a Nazirite. For this reason, the son has the right, because when you finish your Nazirus, you cut off all the hair from your head, which is otherwise an Avera to cut off the hair from your head. So because Halacha Moshe Sinai, you could do it. According to Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina in the name of Reish Lakish, he says it's just Kedei L'Chanchom B'Mitzvos, which is just a Durabana, it's rabbinic. Like Avid Akafa, he's cutting off all the hair from his head. So the Gemara says, "Kasavar akafas kol rosh midurabana mechinoch midurabana." He says, "Okay, yeah." He says, Reish Lakish says, cutting off all the hair from your head, as opposed to just cutting off the corners, is actually rabbinic prohibition. And va'asi chinuch durabana v'dachi akafa durabana. And he says, therefore, the mitzvah of chinuch, of rabbinic mitzvah, overrides the rabbinic prohibition of akafa. The Gemara says, "Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan damar alachi ben Nazir." Makes sense. According to Rabbi Yochanan, says, "Halacha Moshe Sinai by Nazir." For this reason. Megaleach, Maisi carbon. That's why you're able. That's why if you make your son a Nazir, he brings a carbon at the end of it. Nazir brings 3 carbonos. But according to Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Chanina, in the name of Reish Lakish, just you're saying it's just rabbinic, and you're doing this thing. But you can't just do that. You're bringing non-sacred things into the courtyard of the temple. Bringing non-sacred things into the temple is a violation. You can't just bring chulin into the azara. So the Gemara says, well, yes, he says you can. Reish Lakish has the position, he says that's not biblical. Another attempt. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan damar alachi ben Nazir. Rabbi Yochanan says Halacha Moshe Sinai. For this reason, maisi carbon tziporin v'achil kohen malika. He says, okay, no problem. When the kohen, if you become tamei, the kohen brings the carbonos, and then what do? You bring the carbonos, and the Kohen eats them. But how does the Kohen eat them? He doesn't slaughter them. The Kohen kills it with his thumb. It's called malika. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, he's allowed to do it because it's Halacha Moshe Sinai that this boy is a Nazir. But according to Reish Lakish, it's just rabbinic. How are you able to do this? Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, in the name of Reish Lakish, he's eating nevela. He's eating something wasn't slaughtered properly. How are you able to do this? So the Gemara says, Kasavar, he's of the position. Kasavar Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda dein shtito ofna Torah. V'chuim hazara lav diaraisa. He says Reish Lakish is of the position that actually slaughtering a chicken is not biblical. It's not a biblical law, that you're not required to it. And he also says that bringing a non-sacred item into the temple is not a biblical prohibition. So the Gemara says, well, the Savar Rabbi Yossi, does Rabbi Yossi really say that slaughtering this chicken is not a biblical, you're not biblically required to do it? But Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says, that every sin offering cannot be brought in an ambiguous situation. A sin, you have to have such a powerful connection to it that in order for you to repent, you have to know for sure, in order for you to bring the chatos, you need to know for sure that you did the sin. But Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina says that the chatos ha'of can be brought in the case of a doubt, but yet it's not in. How do we know that? Because it says in the verse, it says that if a person is a zav, and it compares a person, a male who has this excretions from his body, a male and a female. Makish nekeva zachar. We compare the female to the male. Ma zachar maybe carbon avah. They just like the male. He only brings a carbon if he's sure he sinned. Av nekeva maybe a carbon avah. Also the female zava, she only brings a carbon if she's sure she sinned. But just like the male also brings in an ambiguous situation. Also, what's the ambiguous situation where the male brings a carbon? If he was with a woman and he wasn't sure if she was a zav at the time. So to a female also brings it if on an ambiguous situation. If she's not sure if she gave birth to a child, she had a fetus came out of her and she doesn't know if it was a fetus. She had something that came out of her body. They just like a male brings it from the same thing we bring if it was a certain. Maybe a suffix. So he brings it also if it's ambiguous. Also the nekeva, she brings from the thing that she brings certainly, she brings it further down. And now says the Gemara, Ma zachar mevi karban v'nechal. I might think just like the male brings the carbon, he also eats it. Afnekeva maybe carbon v'nechal. I might think that the female, the woman also brings her bird and she eats it. Amris lo. We say we don't do that because by a male, it's just one prohibition. What's his prohibition? That he's eating chun ba'azara. But by the female, it's two prohibitions. And what are the two prohibitions? And my shnei what are the two female prohibitions? Isn't it lav isur nevela v'chun ba'azara? Isn't it the nevela and chun ba'azara? So we see from here, according to this Mishnah, which we're assuming that Reish Lakish is paskening like, we're assuming that you're not allowed to eat this bird because it's chulun bazar, and that's why the woman can't eat it. So the Gemara has a question. So that the Gemara seems to leave that question and doesn't respond to it. So therefore, the Gemara seems to prove that Reish Lakish's position is problematic. So Ma'askifa Rav Acha B'Rei Ravika V'Dilma Mechayev Mishum the Milchse could train Yisur in the Rabban. The Gemara defends him. He says, no, maybe you're just going to say he's in violation because he's two rabbinic prohibitions, not two biblical prohibitions, and that's why we don't let the woman eat it. So let us say that this dispute about whether or not why the father can make the son a Nazir or not the mother, whether it's halacha Moshe Sinai or it's the mitzvah of chinuch, maybe it's actually a dispute amongst the Tanaim. Because what does the Tanaim say? An matai madiras beno ben Nazir. So until what point? The father can't make a son a Nazir when he's 30. He has to be at a certain point until he becomes an adult. So what's the age where you can't do it? It's a fundamental dispute. One opinion is ad sheyavi shtei sairos. One is until the son has the physical signs of maturity, having the two signs of adolescence, having two hairs. That's the position of Rebbe. Whereas Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda says ad sheyagil lo nas nidarim. He says no, he doesn't have to have the physical signs. He just has to reach the age of understanding that he knows what a neder means, which is really 1 year prior to his bar mitzvah at the age of 12. So my lav tonight. So isn't this the same dispute? The Rebbe who says until he reaches the age of having the two hairs, he says halacha ben Nazir. He says halacha Moshe Sinai by a Nazir, and therefore afagav l'gil onas nedarim. Even though the son understands what he's talking about, he's a 12-year-old today, can know so much. He can go on YouTube and learn everything. Nevertheless, we're going to say this father can still make the son a Nazir. He has the right to do it until he has the two heirs. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, who says he says no until he reaches the age of understanding. He says, what's the whole purpose? Just to educate him. Say once he went out of his age, meaning to say the father he's already he's precocious. Therefore, the father is not obligated to educate him anymore, and so therefore he can't make the son a Nazir. We see from here that the mitzvah of chinuch ends once the kid is old enough to understand. You're not obligated to teach the child when he's old enough to understand. Gemara says no. Everybody's going to say tzalach Moshe Sinai. What are they arguing? What's the dispute between Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda? Muflas samach ish, which is derabanan. If that they say that if a person is precocious, the child is 12, that's rabbinically. We're going to say that at that case he's rabbinically able to make a vow. The asya diaraisa, and comes along the biblical commandment of a Nazir and dachir derabanan. So Rebbe says that even though he's biblically of sound mind, the biblical law of a Nazir overrides it. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says muflas samach la'ish is diaraisa. He says no, if he is close to the age of understanding, he understands, even though he doesn't have the shtei sairos, he's biblically an adult, and so therefore the father cannot make him a Nazir. Or alternatively, everybody says that the reason for it is, everybody says that the reason why you can make him a Nazir is just it's rabbinic to educate him. And if he reaches the age of understanding, it's rabbanani. So therefore, Rabbi Savar Rabbi says the mitzvah of chinuch overrides the fact that he's rabbinically obligated because he understands. Or as Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says, he's of the position until you reach the age of understanding. He says, therefore, he says, therefore, the mitzvah of chinuch does not override the idea that he's old enough. And then Gemara now tells us a nice story. Lame is one of my favorite stories in Nazir. It's a beautiful story. Beautiful story. So the wisdom of a child. Lema hani tanai kani tanai. Gemara says, let's connect this to another dispute. Tanya, we have a dispute. Ma'aseh Rabbi Chanina. There was a story about Rabbi Chanina. Sheidiro Aviv ben Nazir. So Rabbi Chanina's father said, "You're a Nazir," but they didn't know if he was able to do it because they didn't know if the child was too old, then he wasn't able to do it. So that's the problem. Was the father's vow binding? They view if they Rabbi Gamliel. So the father, you could imagine this. He says, "Oh, we have to go to the Gadol Ador to see if your Nazirus is applicable." So they said, "We're going to go to Rabbi Gamliel." Rabbi Gamliel both go. Rabbi Gamliel was checking him to see if the child was if the vow was binding. He brought him before Rabbi Gamliel. He says, so Rabbi says that they brought him in front of Rabbi Gamliel to check him whether or not he had the two hairs to see if he was an adult or not. And if he was an adult, the vow wouldn't be binding. Rabbi Yossi says, no, why did they bring him? So that's what the dispute. He said he didn't bring him to check him to see if he had two hairs. They brought him to check if he was precocious enough to make the vow. But then what happened? They're starting to check the poor kid. And so then he says, Amarlo, so the Rabbi Chanina pipes up. He says, Rebbe, he says to Rabbi Gamliel, I'll Kani, don't check me. Im katanani, why are you checking me? Im katanani, if I'm a minor, then my father made me a Nazir. Im gadolani, and if I'm an adult, I'll take a vow of Nazirus right now. So he says, why are you bothering to check me? Either way, I'm going to be a Nazir. If my father made me a Nazir, I'm a Nazir. And if my father couldn't, I'm a Nazir. I solve all your problems. What a beautiful boy. Amar Rabbi Gamliel v'nashkal rosh. Rabbi Gamliel stood up and kissed him on his head. Amar muftachani bazeh shemor halacha b'Yisrael. He says, I'm certain this person is going to be a great teacher. Amru lo ayu yamim muatim at shehora Rabbi Yisrael. He became a great Rabbi. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. He says, He says, it makes sense. According to Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, he says, until you reach the age of vows. That's why he says, he says, if I'm a child, I'll be a Nazir because of my father. Ella Rabbi, but according to Rabbi, he says, until I bring forth the two hairs. He's still in his father's domain. We'll conclude with this story tomorrow. We'll start with the story at tomorrow's daf, but I'll stop here and take if anybody has any questions on this beautiful daf. I want to say that